Hello and welcome to another episode of me reacting to fan-made cards. This time I've received a set from Oleg Skovo. I hope I didn't butcher your name, but I've put it on screen. And it's quite a large set, so we're only looking through the third of it today. And these are quite interesting. And I think there's part of these cards, there's a theme to it. And that theme is make the power tech more interesting. And you all know I'm quite happy to look at cards that do that. The first is Advanced Ionospheric Heaters. And this is basically something that is similar to a concept we already have in game, which is oxygen bumpers. But this time it's a temperature bumper, which is pretty interesting since you already can increase the temperature with using power, but the power first needs to be converted to heat, which is done automatically, obviously. But it's quite inefficient. 8 power for one heat or for one temperature bump. 8 power is quite expensive. A power prod costs 7 MC on average, so it takes a bit of MC to develop that much power prod. Heat prod is a bit cheaper to come by and also faster. So advanced ionospheric heaters circumvents that and seems to be quite a strong card because not only does it give you the ability to spend 3 power resources to raise the temperature one step, but you also get heat resources out of that, meaning that you can rush temperature even faster. And it also grants you an instant ocean tile. That means if we compare this to, for example, Subterranean Reservoir, that card costs 11, this costs 20. So for just 9 MC difference, you got this ability plus 3 useful tags. Usually the power tag isn't that useful, but if we combine this with other cards in this set, then it certainly increases in playability and usefulness. And the Space Tech and Science Tech obviously are both really great. Space Tech allowing you to pay for it with titanium, and the Science Tech can unlock combos or combo with other cards like Marsu. Obviously, the ability and the instant effect of this card make it a rush card and a quite strong one. But the amount of tax and the requirement, which is 2 power tax, somewhat make it more of an engine card. This is an interesting mix, but I think the card is really, really strong. This combos exceptionally well with something like Mass Converter. So if you're going for an engine and in the mid game it already looks like you're ahead, finding something like Advanced Ionospheric Heaters just to close out the game fast, get a bit of TR, push tracks is really strong. I think this card could be a bit overtuned. Maybe you should cut the heat that you get out of the activation as well. Also, the iconography on the card is a bit misleading. Since it's an action, it should have that red arrow. This looks more like an effect, but it definitely is an action. But yeah, interesting concept. Basically a bumper, but for temperature instead of oxygen. I like it. Next up, let's reduce the size of this. We have animal shelters. This is another quite interesting concept. Similar to pets, but also quite different to it. It costs 8 MC. It requires 2 animal tags. No other card does this. Obviously, Advanced Ecosystems requires a plant, an animal, and a microbe tag, but no other card requires more than 1 animal tag. Has an animal tag itself. It starts with an animal on it. And each animal on this card is worth 1 VP, so it's a 1-point animal that you can play irrespective of global parameters. So if you get 2 wild tags down Gen 1, for example with Research Network and Research Coordination, then you can immediately play Animal Shelters, which is really strong because does have an action, same as like Fish or Preds, to add an animal to this card each gen. So if you get this down Gen 1 because of 2 wild tags, for example, then this can score a lot of points. Also, animals cannot be removed from this card outside of this card's effect, and that's where the interesting part comes in, because without this effect, I think this card could sometimes be busted, but also would be quite boring, but the effect makes it really interesting. It states as an action once per generation, an opponent may pay you 7 MC to buy an animal from this card and add it to any of their cards if they have an animal collecting card. Probably it should be clarified whether each opponent can do that once per gen or just one opponent can do that. So after one activation, you're safe. Because otherwise, like in a 4-player game, if you play this early on, get a few animals on it, you could lose all of them in like 1 or 2 gens if everyone in the game activates animal shelters once per gen. The lore behind this is super, it makes complete sense. Like it's super logical. You collect animals on it. It is good for society, so it generates points. But people can collect these animals themselves. They can get them out of the animal shelter and adopt them, basically. And that costs a bit of money. So that's really cute. I like it. Also, the dog obviously is really cute. I love that as well. Does it make sense for opponents to remove animals from animal shelters? Because they need to pay you 7 MC. That's the question, which is really interesting. For them, it costs 7 MC, you gain 7 MC, so it's a 14 MC swing. Best case scenario for them, it's a 2-point swing because it's 1 point on your card on animal shelters, it's 1 point on their card, for example, fish. 14 MC for 2 points isn't that great. A point usually is worth 1 MC. Obviously, one situation in which it makes total sense to activate it from their perspective is last gen and you have already passed and you can't do anything with that money that you get. Then obviously yes. Otherwise, it's probably too expensive for them to activate it. If they are super rich and have not a lot of cards on hand, this could be a nice way for them to spend their money. And in that case, you probably regret playing this because you always look forward to situations where your opponents run out of cards to play and just have to resort to standard projects. I think it's just at that edge. It's just at that marginal point where opponents could think about doing it, but it really feels expensive. And I like that about this card. I think it's really creative. Might be too strong in those situations where you get 2 wild techs down early on, or even a wild tech and pets is already enough to get this card down. Really interesting one. Love it. Next up, we have induced fermentation, another power tech, and another combo with power techs. I love it. Costs 8 MC, has a max requirement of minus 12 degrees Celsius, so you need to play this in the early game. Has a microbe and a power tag. It starts with a microbe on this card, but not only with one, because up here it states when you play a card without with a power tag, including this one, add a microbe to this card. So this one microbe down here plus the microbe you get from this tag means you start with 2 microbes on arc-induced fermentation. What can you do with the microbes on here? Once again, you have an action to remove 4 microbes to raise oxygen and gain 4 heat resources. First of all, again, iconography, this should have a red arrow for this action. I think the activation of this is obviously insanely strong. An oxygen bump is worth quite a lot. You also get 4 heat, which is half a heat bump. The card isn't too expensive. You can play it super early on. I mean, you can immediately play it. It does have 2 useful tags. The only problem is you will not play that many power tags. So obviously, if you play Gen 1, you gain, by the way, you gain the microbe on this card, the second one, not from the microbe tag, but from the power tag. But yeah, you still get 2 microbes on here. You can play this super early on. So especially if you play with colonies, you want to get some power prod down. You might play 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 power attacks throughout the whole game. But even if you play 5 power attacks, you don't get to 8. With 5, you go to 8 microbes. With 5, you only get to 7 microbes on arc-induced fermentation, meaning that's not even 2 activations of this. It's probably even worth it to play just for 1 activation because, for example, compare this to, okay, it's not worth it for 1 activation. Compare it to Mining Expedition. That one costs 12. Probably the cheapest way to just get an oxygen bump. You get 2 steel bags of 4MC. So same cost as this, but that card also has the plant destruction on it. For 2 activations, this already paid off great, because then it also granted you a heat bump. For 2 activations, this card is already in the money for sure. So on its own, I would say it's okay, not too strong. If you really lean into power prod, then maybe. Once again, great way to rush. Combine this with a lot of power attacks and an oxygen bumper. Maybe even with that card we spoke about earlier, advanced ionospheric heaters. That would be a crazy way to rush. Where it gets really strong is if you combine this with ECF or symbiotic fungus, or if you play with colonies and there's enceladus in game. Then I think arc-induced fermentation relatively soon gets too busted. The activation is insanely strong. With a colony on enceladus and a trait there per gen, you can basically almost guarantee an oxygen bump plus those 4 heat per gen. That's quite insane. But I like how this gives you another reason to play power attacks. I don't really know how you would turn this down a bit. Maybe again remove the 4 heat. But yeah, or at least lower the amount. Interesting concept though. Next up, Biogenic Acceleration. This one is straightforward. Costs 10 MC, max requirement of 7% oxygen, has a microbe on it. You get 4 microbes that you can add to any card. Probably should have an asterisk next to it. And it requires, it gives you an oxygen bump. So with that max requirement, funnily enough, at 7%, you could use this to get to 8% and get the bonus bump. It definitely is quite good compared to Mining Expedition again. That grants also an oxygen bump, costs 2 more, gives you 2 steel back. So in total, Mining Expedition is a bit cheaper, but the 4 microbes are really strong. At 7% oxygen, you can already play basically all of the great microbe collecting cards, decomposers, ants. If you're playing with Venus, Venusian insects might not be in game yet, but at that point, if it's not in game, it probably will never be in game. So this could be 2 points. You could also combine this with regolith eaters for a surprising 2 oxygen bump for the bonus bump. That would be quite funny. I like the microbe theme. I think if you're playing with more than just base game plus preludes, microbe can get quite strong, especially if you're playing with colonies and some of the promos that are busted. So Biogenic Acceleration could increase that again, but yeah, I like it. Now we have a Contamination, a bit similar to Virus. It costs 7 MC, but it's not an event. It's a green card. It allows you to remove 4 microbes or 2 animals from any player. That's why I said similar to Virus. So this could be -2 points for one of your opponents with both the microbes or the animals, again with ants here. But this could also hit tardigrade, so it could be significantly worse. but you can, in addition, decrease that player's plant production one step. It's interesting that it's not allowed to split this effect between players. So if you're playing 3 or 4 player games, one of your opponents might really hate you after playing this card. And you also get a negative point. That really cements this card as a 2P card. Most of the hate cards already are much, much better in 2P compared to 3P and 4P because you have to pay for the hate card. You most of the time don't get anything out of it. So you basically hit yourself a bit. Obviously, you hit one opponent that hopefully suffers more than you from playing that hate card. So in a 2P game, that's a net positive for you. In a 3 or 4P game, there's other players that are not affected at all. They didn't have to pay for the card, they didn't get hit by the hate effect. So hate cards are much worse in higher player count games. And with Contamination, not only do you have to pay for quite an expensive card, in total this costs 10 MC to buy and play, you also get negative 1 point. So you basically pay 15 MC because a point is worth 5 MC to remove 2 points, hopefully, and a plant prod. Is that worth it? Yeah, probably, but just slightly, right? 2 points, 10 MC. So you trade 5 MC for a plant prod. That's an alright trade. Plant prod in the early game is really expensive. I mean, adapted lichen costs 9 plus 3, so 12 to play. But in the mid to late game, plant prod gets much cheaper. So if you play this in the mid to late game, it probably isn't worth that much anymore. And if you play it in the early game, your opponent probably won't have a target for the animals. And if he has a target for the microbes, then most likely it's not 2 points, but just 1 or even, yeah, at least 1, but you know what I mean. So Contamination, I don't know whether it's that strong, and it's definitely really bad in higher player count games. Next up, we get to 2 corps, and the first one, again with a really strong microbe theme, is Biosync. It starts with a microbe and a science tag, 44 MC, so quite average, but you get to look through the deck to find a microbe card, similar to Splice. You can collect microbe cards on this card, and it has the same point conversion as tardigrades. You have this track here, and it reaches from 0 to 3. You start on 0, and whenever you play a microbe card, you can increase your marker on this track by 1 step until you reach the maximum of 3. And then during the production phase, this production track signals the amount of microbes that you get during the production phase. Let me just check if I have summarized everything this card has to offer. When you play a card with a microbe tag other than this card, that's quite interesting. This microbe tag doesn't count, so you definitely start at 0. Probably you should have just left out this microbe tag, but I guess it's quite important for flavor. This is a microbe corp, so it should have a microbe tag. But this corp obviously is intended to start at 0. Advance your marker on the production track max 3. Yep. And during the production phase, add microbes to any of your cards according to your production on the production track. You may split microbes between different cards. That's also different. For example, if you trade with Enceladus and you don't have a colony there, so you only get the flat amount of microbes you get there from trading there, then you can't split those. You can split the microbes that you get from the colony bonus from the ones that you get from the colony itself, because those are 2 different sources, but you can never split one single resource from one single source. But with Biosync, you are able to do that. And luckily, this corp also allows you to collect microbes itself. You definitely want to find a better collector than this, though, because the whole gimmick of this corp is getting cheap microbes. If you start off, I could imagine games where you start off with a really crazy hand for this. Something like viral enhancers plus cyclophiles plus tardigrades. Immediately get to 2 micro production in Gen 1. And then you have, with cyclophiles, a really good early game recipient of those microbes. That would be quite nice. The problem with this corp is a bit that it's, without the right combo cards, obviously it's really bad. You really need microbe collecting cards and a lot of microbes to make the most out of it. And also its economy is really lackluster. It starts with 44 MC and no economic bonus. You could find something like psychophiles, you could find something like sulfur-eating bacteria that can help you with the economy. But in the base case, pretty poor corp. The ability could be quite strong if you find microbe cards early on, but you really need to find them early on. It doesn't matter if you find 20 microbe tags in the late game. You can only increase your track 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times anyways. So better find microbe collecting cards early on that you can immediately play and max this out as soon as possible. But yeah, interesting concept. Next up, we have HCK, and this one is completely bonkers. Everything on here is crazy in some way or another. First of all, starting capital, 74 MC, highest starting capital in the game, 3 MC prod. You lose 6 TR, so basically you start with -3 prod and -6 points. That's pretty hefty, so the effect better makes up for it. I mean, the starting capital partially does already. The effect, first of all, is when, you have an effect and an action. The effect is when an opponent plays a card that grants any resources other than MC, you gain 1 MC and that resource for each different type of resource. So basically, if they play imported nutrients, you gain 1 MC because they played a card that grants resources other than MC. You gain 1 plant and you gain 1 microbe. That's my understanding of it. If that's true, and that gets triggered multiple times per gen, and probably it will. There's a lot of cards that do stuff like that, especially plant producers like bushes. They grant a one-off amount of plants as well, and those will trigger HCK. That's insane. There's stuff like mineral deposit. There's even preludes like supply drop. You play your corp first, so supply drop would trigger this. That's pretty strong. You get a constant influx of not only MC, but other types of resources as well. And in addition to that, you have an action. Once again, iconography, there's a red arrow missing for the action. Gain 3 MC. Each opponent loses 1 MC. So this is just basically +4 MC once per gen, which could also throw a wrench in your opponent's plans. So, because they basically, especially for Gen 1, when they don't know yet that you play HCK, often you plan out your Gen 1 on the MC exactly that. I keep these 3 cards, or I keep these 5 cards that I can play exactly these 2, and that's exactly the amount of MC that I have. If HCK is in the game and just starts off the game with their action, you can't play one of your cards. Later in the game, you can plan with it. HCK is in game. You need to always factor in 1 MC more than you should. I think this corp is really, really strong. Yes, the -6 TR is crazy. There's no other corp that does something like this. Obviously, for example, Terra Labs, they lose TR, but not 6. So that's a huge impact. But the starting capital plus really strong effect and really strong action, I think more than make up for it. Because I alluded to this earlier. Basically, this is in total -3 production, but this gets made up for with this action. And then you have a really strong effect and really high starting capital. So I think HCK is overtuned. probably too strong. I would say this action down here, I like the least about this corp. It's not that creative. I like this effect up here. That effect seems really strong, but especially in the early game, probably won't trigger that often. In the mid to late game, I think it's more likely, especially with all the planned production cards. I like this effect, so we should leave this in. We should probably just remove the action, keep everything about the corp the same, and see if that plays out well. We have a few more cards. First of all, Cyclotron. This is a mix of like Physics Complex and Death Center. It costs 17 MC, requires 3 power and science tags. Does that mean 3 science tags and 3 power tags? Not quite sure yet. Probably should. The effect is quite strong. It has a power and a science tag itself. For 2 power resources, you can draw 2 cards into hand, discard 1, keep 1, and discard the other, I mean, and add a science resource to this card. So this means you get 1 card draw and half a point per activation, but you get to choose out of 2 cards. That's really good. If you weren't able to choose out of 2 cards, then I'd say it would be worse than Death Center, because the half point I think is worse than the card draw. You pay double the amount of power for the activation. The card is more expensive and has a requirement on it. But the fact that you can draw 2 and take 1 out of those, that gives you the choice, gives you better cards on hand than with Death Center on average. I think it's really good. And I like that this first set of cards has a lot of combo potential for the power tech, and some of it is for rush, and this one obviously is for engine, with the requirement and the point generation and the card draw. But I'm fine with that. You can introduce a few engine pieces if you also introduce creative rush pieces, such as arc-induced fermentation or advanced ionospheric heaters. So I'm completely fine with Cyclotron. I think if this really means 3 science and 3 power tags, then the requirement is quite heavy, and then I'm fine with the strong effect. I quite like this card. If this only means a mix of power and science tag that amounts to 3, then I don't like it. I think then the requirement is too easy, but I think it's not that way. Electric arc furnace, another really interesting way to make the power tech and power prod more valuable. It has a 5 power tech requirement. That's hefty. That means you probably won't be able to play this in the early to mid game. This is a late game card. You can spend steel on it, which is nice, and it scores a few points, but that shouldn't be your main reason to play this, because that's a really poor point conversion, 21 MC for 2 points. The effect is really interesting though. When performing any action, you may spend each power resource as if it were steel or titanium. Your choice for each resource. Not that great in colonies where you want to reserve your power resources for trading anyways. But in a science combo where you play quantum, corona extractor, mass, and you have lots of leftover power, then this can be insane. Power prod is roughly the same, roughly worth the same as steel prod, so that conversion isn't that great, but it's less expensive than titanium prod. So using your power as titanium is a net positive. Obviously grants you flexibility, and also it grants you flexibility on the steel part as well. That's really nice. Also power, if the temperature track is maxed out, you have a lot of power prod and don't have multiple trade fleets, then what are you doing with the resource other than fun thermalist? So at that point, getting electric arc furnace down makes an unusable resource usable again, and really, really beneficial. So creative, hard to play, bit niche. In certain scenarios, it could be insane, but probably a bit expensive. And then I think for the last card of this episode, we have Energy Conglomerate. And this one is pretty straightforward. Costs 11 MC, has an Earth and a power tech. Grants a point. and grants you 1 MC prot per power tag you have. I think this is too weak. pretty simple. Just compare it to Cartel. That one costs 3 MC less. Doesn't come with a point. So let's say Energy Conglomerate is 2 MC cheaper than Cartel. If we subtract out the cost difference and the point, what did I say? 2 MC cheaper than Cartel, but the effect is much weaker. Yes, you will play a few power tags, but if we only take this card and put it into the base game without all of this other power combo potential, we have to once again say power tags mainly do one thing: they give you power prot. You don't want unlimited power prot, or you don't want to pay for unlimited power prot, better to say, so you won't play a huge amount of power tags. Earth tags, on the other hand, with the example of Cartel, they do a vast variety of different things and are generally stronger cards than power tags. They give you all kinds of discounts, they give you economic benefits, they give you different kinds of prot. So Earth tags are much better. You will play more of them probably, and Cartel at the same time requires only 1 Earth tag for 1 MC prot. This requires 2 power tags for 1 MC prot. So it's similar to insects and worms. Insects requires 1 plant tag, and plant tags are generally better, but a bit harder to play than microbe tags. So worms is much worse than insects, and Energy Conglomerate, again, is much worse than Cartel. I think this card isn't that strong. You could probably make it 1 MC for 1 power prot and make it slightly more expensive. So yeah, interesting card. I love the way that we're giving power tags more combo potential, but I think it's too weak. But yeah, next episode we'll go over more cards by this creator. I really enjoyed this first part of the set, so I hope you did too. Let me know in the comments what you thought of these cards. And if you did enjoy the video, please leave a like and consider subscribing. And I will see you in the next one. Have a good one, guys, and goodbye.